Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review. Today we're going to be looking at the spectacular Focal Clear headphone. As you can see here, I've got lots of bits around me that we need to talk about because this headphone is pretty unique in both what it comes with in terms of accessories, but also how it's made and how it sounds. Let's dive in and take a look. So the Focal Clear headphones are an open back headphone, fully open, and they're priced at approximately $1,200 on Amazon. And that makes them the same price as the original HD800s from Sennheiser, but more importantly, cheaper than the newer HD800S from Sennheiser. They're also cheaper by a small amount compared to the AKG 812s. So generally speaking, they're a little bit cheaper than most of the flagship headphones available from key competitors like AKG and Sennheiser, but at the same time, they're performing at least as well, if not better, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Focal lists the Clears as being a flagship headphone in their open back design range, and yet they do actually have a more expensive open back headphone called the Utopia. So it's unclear to me exactly where Focal see this. I don't know if the Utopia is going to get phased out over time, but they seem to consider this their flagship. So I'm going to treat it accordingly in this review. Given that it's priced in the same range as flagships from other brands, I think that's a fairly appropriate place to look at it, and it certainly performs at that level. Now, I'm not one for unboxing videos normally, but I thought it was worth sharing with you some of the images of the unboxing process when you get the Clears. It is one of the best packaged, best presented products I've ever opened. And a big part of that is the cable packaging and the case that I'm about to show you. When you open the box, one of the first things you're greeted with is this beautiful carry case. When you unzip it, inside you've got a cutout where your focals will actually be sitting when you first get them. There's also an elasticized strap to hold the cable in place and a 6.3mm adapter should you need it. The cable in the case is a 3.5mm cord for, say, mobile phone type usage. It's not the cable I've tended to use. In fact, I don't even know if I've used this one, but it's great that there are so many options. However, it doesn't just stop with this one. Also in the packaging is this extra box. Now, when you first get it, it looks like it contains a book or something. It's a big box, it's clearly folds open. And when you open it, what you find is two more cables to work with. I've never received a headphone with this many options for cables, and more importantly, at this level of quality. Headphones like the AudioQuest Nighthawk originally came with two cables. One was for portable use, it wasn't a particularly good cable, and the desktop one was much better quality. In the case of the Clears, all three cables are fantastic quality, oxygen-free copper, and they're terminated in every different connection that most people are going to need. That being a 3.5mm that I mentioned inside the case. Then there's a 6.3mm for normal single-ended headphone connections. And finally, my favorite, the XLR terminated cable for balanced use. So to receive all this off the bat is unheard of in my experience. The Sennheiser HD800 certainly didn't have this many options. The HD800S didn't have this many options. I haven't tried the 820, so I can't comment on those. And I also haven't purchased the AKG K812s or had the retail packaging to actually see what's included, so I can't comment on that either. What I can tell you though is that this is the best I have ever come across in a product. Now obviously that's only helpful if the headphones are actually good quality, but to start this way gave me immense confidence in what I was about to hear and the quality I was to be expecting from the headphones themselves. Let's have a look at the cables themselves for just a moment. At the end that connects to the headphones, you've got a mono 3.5mm jack, one for left, one for right, very clearly labeled. And at the other end, you've got whatever the termination is that you've chosen, be it the XLR 4-pin, the 6.3mm, or the 3.5mm mobile phone style cable. All cables have a beautiful woven sheathing. They're thick, but they're relatively supple. They hold a little bit of the kink from the coiling up in the box, but generally speaking, they're supple, they're flexible, and they feel really high quality. Jumping back to the case for just a moment, the case itself is, I would call it a hard case. It's got a little bit of give, but not very much at all. It's got a handle that you could carry it with. It's fairly bulky, obviously, because these are not exactly a portable headphone. And with that in mind, whilst I really appreciate having the case, I do question how much it's going to get used by most people. These are a very open headphone. They're not something you're going to take with you to use on public transport or in a plane. Even in an office, it's unlikely unless you've got your very own office with a door you can close, because they leak sound like nothing else because they're fully open, and that's what should happen. So I really appreciate that Focal provide a case like this. I just question how much people are actually going to use it. The first thing you think when you pick up a pair of Focal Clears is that they're beautifully made from beautiful materials. We've got leather, we've got perforated Alcantara on the inside of the headband and on the cups themselves. All of the chassis of the headphones themselves is made of metal with these beautiful grills around the outside, these beautiful polished or at least brushed finishes outside. Everything about it is spectacularly made. The metal itself is, how to describe it, it's a little bit thin in the sense that it's not the nicest touch. It doesn't feel as good as I'd like it to on the edge. It's not as rounded as I'd like. There's no sharp edges, but it's not exactly a luxurious feel on these pieces of the yoke here, on these corners of the yoke. That's a really minor gripe, but if I was going to pick one thing that I didn't particularly like, that would be what it would be. Having said that, they're strong, they're sturdy, and they do exactly what they're meant to do. The notches to change the size of the headphone are really clear and they hold once you put them there, so they're not going to slip and change size on your head. Everything about it is actually really, really great, with the exception of the feel of that one thing I mentioned. On the inside of the cups, you can see the driver itself is very clear, but it's also very well protected by this really fine mesh that's very transparent visually and obviously acoustically transparent as well. Finally, the connections for the cables themselves are on the bottom of each ear cup, and they're very well marked, very clearly marked by an embossed L or R on each side. What's really nice about these connections is that the cables lock in, but not through any sort of twisting or fiddly way. You can literally just take the cord, push it in, and you feel a very nice, definite snap when it goes into place, which means that it stays in place, but it's also easy to remove without having to worry about which way you're twisting it or getting it lined up in the first place. It's a much more straightforward way than some of the alternatives that I've seen on the market. Let's quickly talk about what makes the sound and what makes the Focal Clears a little bit different from other headphones on the market. If you've watched some of my other reviews, you'll know that I've got a preference for headphones with proper drivers. And what I mean by that is a driver like a speaker, like a freestanding speaker, as opposed to the mylar cones that are often used in headphones. The reason for this is that a proper speaker-style dome moves in a piston-like manner, and that means it produces a consistent, non-distorted waveform that goes into your ear. In the case of other headphones on the market, even some flagships, they're using mylar, and what that means is that the cone itself is one piece, and it's expected to bend at the edges in order to allow the middle to actually move. The problem with that is it creates distortion. It actually breaks up the shape of the cone and creates an inconsistent waveform. In the case of the Clears, what Focal have done is actually made a driver that is very much like a speaker driver. When you look on the inside of the headphone, you can actually see in there a metallic dome that has a very clear shape to it, and it's supported by a metal surround. That's really important because a couple of things are going on here. The dome itself being metal is very rigid. It's also able to be very light at the same time because metal is so rigid, they can keep it thin and stay strong. It's also in a concave convex shape, so they call it an M-shaped dome. Really what that means is there's a sharp downward dip at the edges before it has a dome in the center, but it's producing this kind of M shape overall, which means that you're getting, again, extra rigidity that allows it to be extra light and therefore highly movable. The end result of all this is a very responsive dome that stays very linear throughout its delivery of the waveform and results in a very clean, clear sound. In the case of the Clear, Focal have used an aluminium magnesium hybrid for the dome. In some of their other speakers, they use different metals depending on the price point. And obviously this is second from their very top price point in open back speakers. So it's almost as good as Focal believe you can get. It's a step behind the beryllium drivers in the Utopias, but from what I'm hearing, it's not a problem that it's not quite the best of the best. They do sound fantastic, as I'll talk about in just a moment. One final thing I should mention about the acoustic design of these headphones, I've already touched on it slightly, is the mesh used on the outside here. It's a very fine wire mesh that's very clearly, you can actually see the weave of it. It looks beautiful, it feels beautiful, but it means they are incredibly open. So something like the clear is just as open as a headphone like the HD800 or HD800S. When you put them on, you can hear everything going on around you, which also means that everyone around you can hear everything that's going on in your music. That might be a good thing for you, it might be a bad thing for you, it depends on where you're using them. Generally speaking, a very open headphone means a very open sound, and that results in a sense of space in the sound stage that you can almost only ever get from having a super open design like this. Once again, for those of you who've watched a number of my videos, you'll know that I tend to prefer a slightly warmer, more musical sound. I'm not into analytical headphones. I'm not into the scalpel sharp analytical dissection of music. I enjoy putting on a pair of headphones, getting lost in the music, and hopefully tapping my feet, bobbing my head, and just really getting involved in the musical experience. I have to say, all of the flagship headphones I've tried in the past, say the HD800s, the HD800S, the Beyerdynamic T1, when we're talking dynamic driver flagships, they all tend to have one thing in common, and that is this analytical clarity. That clarity is great for some people, but it's not been to my taste. I personally find the HD800 completely soulless. I find the HD800S somewhat better, but still lacking in soul. Fantastic, don't get me wrong, they're brilliant at what they're aiming to do, but they're not a headphone that I would choose to own. The clears, on the other hand, hit the perfect balance in my mind between musicality and analytics and transparency. They just tiptoe that line though, if I'm going to be specific about it. If they were just one notch away from where they are, as in more towards analytical, I don't think I'd enjoy them as much as I do. As it is, they sit right on the balance point of complete transparency, complete ability to pull apart the music and hear every detail, but they've got just enough warmth and just enough bass that I still enjoy them every single time I put them on. They're not a foot tapping, head bobbing type of headphone. I very rarely find myself kind of grooving away with music when I'm listening to the clears. I'd turn to the AudioQuest Nighthawks or Night Owls for something like that, but I absolutely enjoy them every time I listen to them. And one of the things I enjoy is the fact that they reveal things to me about the tracks without pulling it apart so much that I can't get lost within the music. As I said, they strike that perfect balance. So in terms of bass delivery, as you'd expect from what I've just said about the overall tonality, the bass is good, it's fast, it's punchy, it decays quite quickly. It's not got the deep rumble, but it does have the extension, if that makes sense. So it goes deep, it plays deep, it hits hard when it needs to, but it doesn't have that enveloping kind of rich rumble that some headphones have and that I tend to quite like. As I said before, it has enough bass but still stays transparent and clear. Getting into the mid-range, everything in the mid-range is absolutely picture perfect in my mind. So it's well textured, the lower mids and the upper mids are very well balanced with one another. There's no lean towards male or female vocals. It doesn't get tinny in the upper mids as some of the more analytical sounding headphones can do. Everything is just really perfectly placed. It focuses the sound really well in the mid-range as well, so you get a really realistic sense of the vocals or the instruments that are sitting front and center in the recording. Again, it doesn't push them too far forward to take you out of the musical experience, but everything's there if you do want to pull it apart, and it's just crystal clear, perfectly rendered sound through that mid-range band. So finally, let's talk about treble. This is often for me the make or break area of a headphone. I want my treble done right. I want it to sound natural, I want it to be clear and crisp, but not overdone. The moment a headphone gets into overdoing treble, I'm out, I'm done, I'm not interested. I want something that sounds natural, but not forced. And one of the tricks that a lot of the analytical headphones have often done is actually allow there to be a spike in the treble, which creates this sense of clarity and precision and transparency, but it often comes at the expense of long-term listening enjoyment. And that's one area that the clears actually excel. They have the treble presentation that's sparkly, transparent, and realistic, but it's never spiky. I never feel like I need to take the headphones off and have a rest for a while. I could wear them all day, no problems at all. And that's really important to me. I want a headphone that I can literally put on and forget that it's on my head, other than obviously a sense of sometimes the weight of a headphone after a few hours. But in terms of the musical comfort of the headphones, the clears are right on the money. One of the things I like most about the sound from the clears is that the overall package of bass, mid, and treble combine to make a sound that's got a sense of dynamics and energy to it. The clears strike a perfect balance between that leading edge energy and the ongoing resonance and fullness of the note. So you get that sense that you're hearing a live instrument. Nothing's been muffled by recording processes or the chain of reproduction. But at the same time, it's not being overdone and pushed in your face so as to offset the energy of that leading edge with the rest of the note. Everything's perfectly balanced and you just get to enjoy the music as it's meant to be, but with a sense of excitement and fun added in by the clarity and transparency that you're getting from the clears. One final thing I should mention while we're talking about sound signature and the balance between bass, mid and treble is that often with flagship headphones that do skirt the line or even go full on into analytics, is that sometimes the device you connect them to has a really big part in how much you enjoy the headphone. Certainly with the HD800 and even the HD800S for me, I enjoyed them most with my tube amplifier, the bottlehead mainline. If I connected those headphones to something more linear, like the THX789 headphone amp, I'd often find the enjoyment went away because I wasn't getting the extra richness and the harmonic distortion that's actually a positive from a tube amplifier. In the case of the clears, it's really not an issue. I've spent most of my time listening to the clears between the mainline and the 789. I've also used it on the Burson Audio Fun amplifier, and I can honestly say whichever I plug it into, it's equally as enjoyable because they've got that balance just right. Now certainly they perform better from the 789 and from the mainline, with the mainline being the best of the bunch, but they're completely enjoyable no matter what I plug them into because the headphones are so beautifully tuned, and also, as you'll see in the specifications in the description, they're also a really sensitive headphone. They're 55 ohms and about 104 decibels of sensitivity. So they're easy to drive, but will also give you maximum performance if you put them with better type amplifiers. So you've really got the best of both worlds here. You've got top quality sound from any possible source, but something that scales up beautifully with the better quality sources you might provide it with. The last thing we need to talk about when it comes to sound quality is the staging and imaging. With all of that fantastic balance between the bass, the mid and the treble, it's not surprising to learn that the stage is fantastic. When you put on the headphones, you get this incredible sense of space around you in the music. You can pick out every single sound and it is positioned perfectly within the soundstage. One of the things I often comment on in my reviews is the coherency of the soundstage. So in some headphones, you get a blob of sound here and a blob of sound here and a blob of sound here. In the case of the clears, everything's just well put together. It doesn't merge together, everything has good space between it, but it feels like it all belongs within the same space within the recording. And that's really important for realism and for that ability, as I talked about before, to just lose yourself in the music. So in my opinion overall, the Focal Clears are probably the best flagship headphone on the market. I've owned the HD800s. I've had a lengthy time with the HD800S for a review on my blog, and I'll put the link below if you'd like to read it. I have auditioned at length the AKG K812s, and in my mind, out of those 4 headphones, with the 4th being the Clear, it's absolutely a no contest. The Clear get the best elements of each of those other headphones, and they blend it all together into the perfect package. Now obviously aesthetics is something that we're all going to be different in. You may like the silver and grey style, you may hate it. I quite like it, I like the fact that it's different, but putting aside the aesthetics, to me these are the perfect flagship headphone, and it's a huge bonus that they're actually cheaper than those alternatives that I just mentioned. Now, everyone's going to have their own preferences, you might differ, that's fine, but for me, I would highly recommend anyone looking for a flagship headphone to absolutely try out the Focal Clear. If that sounds like a headphone for you, I'll put an affiliate link below. If you are thinking about purchasing the Clears or any other audio gear or anything at all really from Amazon, clicking on that link helps to provide a little bit of income to this channel, and that helps me to continue bringing reviews like this one to you. On that note, I've got quite a number of reviews in the queue at the moment, including the AudioQuest Night Owl headphones, some XLR interconnects from AudioQuest, I've got some op amps from Sparkos Labs, and I've got the very interesting Neurophone headphones which calibrate themselves to your personal hearing characteristics. They're a little bit like the Eventos that I reviewed a while ago, and I can tell you that they're very, very interesting. So if you're interested in any of those or any future reviews, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and we'll look forward to seeing you here next time on Passion for Sound.